here we go. Kia ora, nice to meet you. Trent, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Trent Mankelow. I am semi-retired these days is how I describe what I do. So I've made a pretty conscious decision to dial down the career, dial up the kids. So I have Ada, who's 11 years old, and Stanley, who's 9 years old.
Cool. And what are the things that are fun for you with the kids at the moment?
Stanley has got an amazing imagination, so he is a real chatterbox, is always inventing new things. So, and in surprising ways, like he'll come up to me and say, "Dad, what would be on your ideal submarine?" And then I have to think up all sorts of wacky things.
Yeah.
And really, a lot of the times these questions are just, he's just waiting for you to lob that same question back to him because he's spent hours thinking about his ideal submarine. So he's always in drawing and kind of imagining these different concepts and that sort of thing. So he's great fun. Ada has just started at intermediate school, so is enjoying the kind of a little bit of extra freedom that you get there and the kind of subjects that you get into that you don't at primary school. She's a mad keen baker, so her and I do a lot of baking together and watch a lot of baking shows, of which there are a million.
Lovely.
So she's great too.
Nice. And what are the things that you'd like us to focus on and talk about today?
Well, one of the things that is on my mind at the moment is Stanley. And in lots of ways, he is a very confident kid and sort of confident in his own skin. Like he's, if Ada's got a play date and he's playing Lego and the play date comes and hangs out with Stanley, like he'll be happy as and not, doesn't really care if you're a boy or a girl, and just, if you're into what he's into, then, all that sort of stuff. Except for there is a very specific set of circumstances where he really gets quite uncomfortable and anxious, and that's in particular where he is with a group of kids who he doesn't necessarily know, and he feels like they know more than him. So what that's meant in practice is that pretty much every extracurricular activity that we try and get him involved in, he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to look stupid in front of the other kids. So, he'll do karate and have a great lesson and seem to be having a thoroughly good time and then never want to go back. And he's done that with hip-hop dance. He's a great little dancer. He's done it with scouts. There's all these different things. So the challenge, I guess, is... obviously you want a kid who isn't afraid to fail and isn't afraid to, occasionally look stupid and perhaps appreciates that this is, I don't know, everyone feels like that if they're kind of starting out with a new group, doing a new skill that they don't know how to do. So you sort of want to encourage them to realise that and to, I don't know, I guess my worry is that if he doesn't kind of get over this fear, then he ends up living a life that's, less full and rich because he's not willing to take risks. He's so afraid of looking stupid in front of other people.
So what do you know about helping kids to think their way through these things?
I guess a little bit. So, done a bunch of reading, not necessarily about parenting specifically, but that kind of growth mindset stuff. Is it Carol Dweck? And grit and resilience. What's the woman's name that wrote that book? But anyway, they kind of unfortunately they say the stuff which, I don't know, to me appears to be common sense, is that you encourage the kids to give this stuff a go, that you put some boundaries around it perhaps. So you say, okay, you only have to do soccer for a term. If you don't like it by the end, you can choose another thing, but you have to choose one of these things to do, and you're going to stick at it until a natural break. You don't want to let the team down, all that sort of stuff. So, so I've done a bit of reading about that. That growth mindset stuff is actually stuff that they cover at primary school now too. So that's kind of cool that they're actually teaching that to the children. And by growth mindset, that's I don't know how familiar your listeners will be with that kind of concept, but the idea is that our brain is able to grow and kind of that we aren't kind of born into this world with a fixed set of skills. That and if you have a mindset that is kind of growth, and particularly growth through failure. I mean, every innovation, it's just failure. It's a path of failure until it's not. So. So I guess I'm familiar with all of that in concept, but of course when it comes time to actually encouraging Stanley to get out of his comfort zone, because you also don't want to force kids to do stuff too, you know what I mean? Like, you must play cricket, or
like it's a balance.
Yeah,
yes.
It feels like a balance. And so what we've tried for this term is to say, okay, here are a set of different activities that you can sign up for. Most of them are new to him, so basketball and it's sporting stuff, and it's non-sporting stuff. It's drama, it's scouts again, and sort of said, okay, to give him some agency, choose from this list. And so that's what he's done. So he's chosen the Learn to Rollerblade and Learn to Skateboard classes.
Cool.
At Kilburn Rec Centre, both cool, both kind of within his interests. It's going to be very interesting to see how he goes with that. One of the slight bummers is that he's with his sister for one of those classes, and I think that's not necessarily, again, for teaching that kind of a bit more resilience and a bit more perhaps coping and learning by himself, having his sister around.
It may also give him some confidence too. So.
Yeah, and one of those activities he's doing by himself, so he's doing skateboarding by himself. So yeah, it's a fine line, like you said. It's kind of between kind of pushing them, but also kind of acknowledging that,
So if this person was actually in one of your startups, what would your strategies be?
If I was managing him, that's actually a good way to think about it. I often think that in reverse, like sometimes looking after staff is like managing children. What we do, we'd probably have those more general conversations about failure and innovation and growth and the mindset around all of those things. But we'd probably make quite a concrete plan to deal with it. And again, this is on the assumption that staff member was wanting to change. So I guess that's possibly something that's a little bit different.
Brilliant question though.
Yeah.
Does he?
Does Stanley want to change?
So that's the interesting thing is, what does this behaviour provide for him in terms of power within the family?
I'm not sure what you mean by that. So yeah, I think the main thing that he's trying to do is he's trying to avoid that icky feeling of when you rock up to something and you're brand new and you don't know anyone.
So what's the secondary gain for him in having this behaviour? So if we think about everything as a habit, and you're talking about the fact that this is a bit of a pattern now, what's the reward for him in maintaining that behaviour?
I guess the reward is that not feeling icky. I mean, arguably too, you could say the reward is that he can have more play dates or whatever because he doesn't have a week full of extracurricular activities.
So that might be the question to ask him: does he want the activities?
Yeah.
Because I love that question that you talked about. Your staff member, do they want to change? Does he want to learn this skill?
Yeah,
of not feeling yucky.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it's a great explicit question to ask him. I mean, things like I was surprised that he chose rollerblading. There are some things like skateboarding. He wants to be. He is in some ways, typical 9-year-old boy who's all bluster and kind of, he's a bit like that with his mountain biking as well. He thinks he's the man when he's on his mountain bike, and kind of actually that in some ways gets in the way of his skill, improving his skills. I was, like I say, a little bit surprised to see him choose rollerblading, but that might be partly about that kind of, having a sister to kind of lean on as well.
So part of the things that I was thinking about is where does his power come from, and is this repeating behaviour a way of him having some agency within the family? And we often reward behaviour in a way that we're not conscious of. And so just to have a bit of a think about that. And if we pay him lots of attention because of that and give him lots more choices, then why would he do anything different?
Yeah, I think the main thing that springs to mind when you frame it like that is that, like I say, having the freedom to, be doing play dates or that kind of thing.
And that might be fabulous.
Yeah, so why would he want to change? Yeah.
The other thing I was thinking about is the idea of script. Do you know about that idea? That we have a story in our head about who we are. And so do you know the story that he tells about himself?
Probably not quite that framework, but like I say, we've had conversations where he has talked about that having that anxiety. So yeah, again, that's a really interesting framing of it too. Is it? Why does he think he's not going to learn? Does he think that other people haven't been in his position? Does he think that and it might be one of those kind of opposite sides of the coin to, sometimes his overconfidence, he's, he may not want to look stupid because he's projected that he is,
So he's written the history, or, the future, and he's seen himself as not being competent in that sitting, and so he stops himself from doing that.
That's right, yeah. And there have been times when, especially when he was a bit younger, where he'd, we buy him a skateboard and then, super stoked when he gets the skateboard, doesn't really use it. We ask him why, and he's like, I already know how to skateboard.
Yep.
And it's like, well, we've not once seen you do it, so...
he's done it a lot in his head.
Yeah. So that fear of failure is, might be a lot relating to, that's, like you say, that script in his head about, I'm someone who does not fail.
And I also think that our society is really tough on kids at this present time. We do assess them to the nth part of their life, and so they're always comparing themselves to other people, and that makes it really hard for them to have that sense of who they are and how to be competent, even though we may not be perfect. And thinking about how can we help our kids to be able to be happy with who they are, lock, stock and barrel, because actually nobody's perfect. No. And therefore, what are the strategies that you as a parent can employ in order to help him remember that he's lovable, that he's enough, that he can try everything as many times as he needs to, that he's got a lovely brain, he can think and he can learn.
Yeah, and coming back to that kind of, if he was a staff member, you would, I think one thing you can do in front of staff, and I think it works equally well with kids, is to model that behaviour, and in this case that would be to talk about failure, because I think when you're that age, you look to your parents and you kind of have this, they're superhuman in your mind, right? They know all the answers.
And you don't want to dip into that too much, just say.
No, you don't. That you're exactly right. But to talk about times, when I have been afraid about doing something, and to be modelling, trying new things, not just talk about a time when I was feeling unsure, but to actually, myself be doing the new things.
And I think it's also about that emotional regulation in those moments. And so thinking about what do you already know about helping yourself to manage when you're fearful or worried, and how do we notice our kids doing it in a way that they might do ordinarily at home, that they could then practice when they go into another setting.
Got a cat taking over the conversation at the moment. Those kind of, what's the worst that could happen, all those kind of, or even, there's a classic thing you can do when you are feeling nervous. You can flip it on its head and say to yourself that this isn't nervousness, this is excitement. And you can kind of fact, lots of studies suggest that you actually, those butterflies in your stomach and all those sort of things are things which can improve your performance.
Yep.
If it's framed.
That's
in the
right.
way.
And so catching the thought that he's got when he is noticing himself being fearful and asking himself the question, is it true that I am blah, 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 blah? And a chap called Daniel Armin, he talks about ants in our head, automatic negative thoughts, and we don't want to have an infestation. And so he talks about 4 questions. Is it true? And then, because he knows that our feelings trick us, is it absolutely true? What's the data that shows you? Then the third question is, how do I feel and behave when I believe that thought? The fourth question is, how would I feel and behave if I didn't believe that thought? And then I've added a 5th question, which is, what now? So helping us to notice in that moment, and that's Brené Brown's work around vulnerability, to be able to recognise when we're vulnerable and to see that as a strength, because we're naming the thing that we're confronting. We're not pretending that it's something else. And when we can name it, we can problem solve it. But if we don't name it, we can't.
Yeah, no, I have heard that when you name feelings, you kind of somewhat lose their power over you. I can't imagine a 9-year-old boy running through those set of questions.
Well, do you know what? I've done this week with a kid who's about that age.
Yeah.
And we gave him a list of all the different ants, which Daniel names, and he came back and he told me which ones he had, and then we structured some questions for him.
Cool.
Yeah, so actually we underestimate our kids' ability to be able to think their way through things. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But again, of course, it's about knowing your child and what they're wanting and able to manage at that particular time.
Yeah, I was thinking more in the moment, coming up with the 5 questions.
Well, it may be that he just says, have I got an ant in my head? Once you've taught him about the ants. Yeah. And do I want it there? And knowing that we've got the choice.
Yeah, that's actually a bit of a breakthrough, isn't it? That we can somewhat choose our feelings, right? Or we can reframe things. We're not victims to our own thinking.
And that certainly frees up a lot of energy, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, whether or not that that whether he will outgrow it. And that's not me, with some wishful thinking. That's just as you go through life, and there are more opportunities for you to, practice this kind of thing. And it's not even, extracurricular is one thing, but getting up in front of the class and kind of like there are other opportunities for him to be in these positions, and as you practice that and realise it's perhaps not as scary as you think, or that worst case scenario never comes to pass. So I'd be curious to see through time, but it definitely feels like it's been something over the last 2 or 3 years which has been a thing.
And of course we know about how habits form and become part of who we are, and as parents, helping our children to be able to find strategies that work for them to be able to resolve their own problems, not for us to solve it.
Yes, yeah, that's super important.
And thinking about all the things that he's tried, what has been the things that have actually worked for him, and reminding him that he's got that capacity, that if he's been scared or nervous of something, when has he done that, and thinking about how he could bring that into the future. So what are you thinking now?
Well, I'm thinking he's kind of, in a sense, he's got a lot of the tools, and like he's in, he's fun, he's full of ideas, he's creative, he's pretty outgoing, but also, happy in his own skin in a lot of way. Like it feels like he's got, everything that he needs to be able to, push through this, what is hopefully a phase. Because like I say, if you go through life with that attitude of not wanting to fail or not wanting to look stupid, then it's pretty hard to see how you be successful in life. So that's the thing that was in my head, is actually that it's not far off for him. It's not ungraspable, these kind of ideas.
And how do you think that you can best go about coaching him and supporting him?
Well, like you say, I think it's a little bit of probably before some of these things is to do a little bit of not necessarily role play, but that kind of what's going to happen today. Okay, this is the first time that you've been to the rollerblading, but this is one of the challenges with kind of having a parenting relationship where they live half time with their mum and half time with me, is that it's actually Louise who's taking them to these first two sessions. So that's like I say, somewhat of a challenge. But yeah, I think before the sessions, just kind of understanding what's in his head, where his worries are, and then maybe doing a little bit of what like you say, kind of getting him to think through some of those what ifs and kind of figuring out how to deal with things if he is feeling a bit overwhelmed.
Yeah, and what do you think the thing that he would get the most encouragement from you? What do you think if you said that to him?
I think that like I say, that the encouragement would be probably for me to be showing him how I've failed and to kind of normalise it, I guess. And certainly in terms of picking up new things, that's something that I really do try and model with the kids. So you can see in my lounge I've got some DJ decks. That's a brand new hobby that I've just taken up.
Cool.
And yeah, we do a bunch of quirky things. I learnt a poem by heart to say in front of a group of friends, and ended up having this whole poetry soiree, and I was learning it so often that the kids actually kind of pretty much learnt the poem by heart too by the time I'd recite it to them every morning. So yeah, like I say, I do try and model some of that kind of trying new things and being in a position of knowing nothing, knowing no one, knowing so I think that is kind of helpful, but that's a little bit more baseline. I think, like I say, perhaps talking about failures that I've had, that my own personal things that failure might not be the right way to frame it, but to try and let him know that this feeling that he's got, this ickiness around new people, new surrounding, new skill, that is normal and common, and something that I've dealt with and something that people would deal with every day.
Yeah. And as you say, how important it is to be able to recognise that we can have faith in ourselves and work through it.
Yeah.
And know that that's important. And I was thinking, we'd had a conversation about this, the community of New Zealand and how things are at the moment, and being able to have difficult conversations and to be in situations that are tricky is going to be a big part of our future. And so thinking about that as another reason to help him to be able to do this. So is there something else you'd like to say before we finish off?
Look, I think that one thing that I've been really surprised by and delighted by is how this kind of stuff is taught at school. Like it is, I guess I had some expectations about primary school being like when I was at primary school, right? And it's not, because the pedagogy and the how we think about how children learn and what they ought to be taught. That's changed a lot in the decades since I was at primary school. So even things like co-designing, around, they were doing that in kind of when they're 5 or 6 year olds, kind of got some of these techniques which I think are very, very helpful. So that makes this stuff easier, because you end up having a conversation using a common vocabulary and kind of I'm sure that it's different from school to school, but certainly in our school, they this is the sort of stuff that they are talking about with kids. It's not just here is the kind of the skills for reading and writing and arithmetic. It's also the kind of how you problem solve, how you think about yourself, manage yourself. So that makes, I think, these kind of things a bit easier.
Yeah. And isn't it true that it takes a community to grow our children?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. yeah, it was quite funny. Of you know, a good friend and neighbour is we were talking about go karting, and Stanley has recently built a go kart as part of a thing at school.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my neighbour has got a 21-year-old daughter, and I think he was a little bit jealous to hear about this go karting stuff. He's like, oh yeah, if your boy ever wants to come over and we'll build a go kart together.
Nice.
And, so you're right. It's and I think they both really enjoyed it.
Mm.
Although Stanley's just built the go kart, so maybe he needs a different project. But
There's always another project around the corner. Mm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time with me talking about this today. That's a really useful topic for us to think about, not only in terms of worry or moving into other community situations, but lots of doubt that our children have going into this crazy world we currently live in, and that ability to be able to manage our thinking and manage our feelings around that is such a skill.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, it's I mean, it's stuff that we all struggle with, right? They're kind of
Clearly.
yeah. So yeah, nothing new.
So thank you very much.
You're so welcome.